this video, we'll be talking about Smart Chart standard management for the instruments Cloud Runner, WaveScan, Microgloss, and Haze Guard.
The first step in adjusting your standard settings is to select your color family from the list on the left, and then the tab for the instrument you want to adjust the settings for. Now note that if I select a single standard within that color family, the settings get grayed out. I can only adjust settings for the entire color family, not for individual standards. So the settings for the Cloud Runner include the scales to include in the measurement and also pass-fail tolerancing for those scales. So for example, we'll add a few scales here, the modeling scales, and I can just select them and then press the plus button, or I can simply double click on the scale I want, and that will send it over. And the next step is to adjust my tolerances. Now it has some default tolerances already built in, but you can of course change those. Now, for example, for modeling, a tolerance of 5 is generally a good starting point, meaning that any reading less than 5 would be considered acceptable, and if the modeling is greater than 5, that would be considered a fail. Now that I've added the scales I want and I've adjusted my tolerances, I can save this standard to save those settings. And I can then take these standards and transfer them to my Cloud Runner and take the readings and get a pass-fail indication based on these tolerance settings. But of course, it is possible to set up standards to work with more than one instrument. As you can see from these tabs at the top, we have multiple instruments to select from here. So next up, I'll adjust the settings for these standards for the WaveScan. And here we see a few settings on the left, including in sample. This is the number of readings that you'll need to average for each sample. And we also have the scan length. You can select 5, 10, or 20 centimeters for the scan length for the WaveScan. It's generally recommended to do the longest scan length possible for the part that you're measuring. That will give you the most data, or the most accurate data, I should say. And the next step is to add the desired scales. So for example, here I can add the balance scale, rating, the Fiat appearance matrix or FAM scale, as well as the Fiat accuracy scale. And I can then adjust my settings as desired for these scales. Again, that is usually specified by the customer or the OEM. Next up, we have the Microgloss. And here again, I see a few settings on the left. I see my different geometries, gloss geometries I can select from. So we have the 20, 60, and 85, for example, the 3 international standards. Also the 45 and 75, which are sort of specialty angles for Microgloss. But if you happen to have one of those specialty meters, you can certainly set that up here as well. You can select either a single tolerance or to have a tolerance for measurements in both the vertical and horizontal direction. You can also select the scale to display gloss in, either in gloss units or percent reflectance. And for those units that have the built-in film thickness gauge, you can also select the scale for the thickness measurements, either in microns or mils. So now that I've selected my scales, my geometries that I'm going to be measuring with my Microgloss, again, I can set tolerances for this by pressing these plus signs. And so let's say I want my gloss to be below 30 gloss units. This would indicate that anything above 30 gloss units would be considered a fail, and anything below 30 gloss units would be considered a pass for the 20-degree gloss measurement. And lastly, we have the Haze Guard. So again, we have the in sample option to do averaging for each sample. And then below that, we have the available scales for the Haze Guard I, the transmittance and haze scales under Illuminate C and Illuminate A for ASTM, as well as under the ISO method, which uses the D65 illuminant, and then the clarity measurement, which is unique to BIC. So I can select as many of these as I want. Yes, you can do multiple transmittance and haze measurements at the same time. And again, it has some default tolerances, but I can adjust these as desired to meet the specifications for the product that I'm measuring. And again, anytime you make adjustments in standard management, make sure that you click Save, and it will also prompt you to save when you exit out.